Hello Year 2, how are you? And welcome to today's reading lesson. Now today we're going to be carrying on with Fantastic Mr. Fox and looking at chapter 12, which is called Badger. Now the reading skill that we're going to be focusing on today is sequencing. And we have got our friend here, Sequencing Suki, to help us. Now remember, Sequencing Suki might ask us what happens after something or what happens before something. She might also ask us to order some events from an extract, so to put them in the order in which they happened. Now, as well as sequencing this lesson, we're also going to be looking at some vocabulary. So as we're reading the chapter, we're going to stop at certain words. We're going to look at the words around the word, and then try and work out its meaning. Now, before we move on to chapter 12, I would like to see what you can remember from chapter 11. So here we have a hand. And I would like you to think of 1 point for each finger about the last chapter. So can you write the last chapter in 5 points? What were the 5 most important things that happened in the last chapter? Pause the video now and have a go. Okay, Year 2, so have you come up with your 5 points? Fantastic, well done. Well, I had a go as well. Would you like to see my 5 points? Okay, so my first point is that the small fox ran back through the tunnel. That happened at the very start of the chapter, didn't it? And then we have the small fox burst into the room where Mrs. Fox was sleeping and woke her up. Then after that, the small fox explained where they had got the hens from. Then number 4, Mrs. Fox and the small fox started preparing the feast, ready for when they returned. And then Mr. Fox decided where they are going next, and him and the other small foxes started digging. So there we go. There are my 5 points for chapter 11. Now, some of your points might be similar to mine, but some of them might be different, okay? As long as you've got 5 points and they're to do with chapter 11, that's perfect. Now, before we start reading the chapter, I would like to have a look at these 3 animals here, because we're going to be introduced to these 3 animals in the next chapter. Now, what are these animals called? Do you know? And do you know any information about these animals? What do these animals have in common? What is the same about these animals? Could you pause the video now and have a think? Okay, Year 2, so did you know anything about these animals? Well, let's have a look. So the first animal is called a weasel, okay? Now the second animal, you might recognise this one. Well, this is a badger. And then the third animal, what's this called? Ah, yes, it's a mole. So we've got a weasel, a badger and a mole. Now, what do we know about these animals? What do they have in common? Well, all of these animals can be found underground, just like Mr. Fox. So we might be, Mr. Fox might meet these animals underground while he's digging. And all of these animals are around at night time, okay? So they move around during the night. So we've got a weasel, a badger and a mole. So I thought it was a good idea to do this activity so that when you meet the characters in the book, you can imagine what they look like as you're reading, okay? Because it's hard to read about an animal that you don't know what it looks like or anything about it, okay? So now you will know what these animals look like and some facts about them when we meet them. Okay, so let's start reading our chapter. So I've sent you these pages on your resource, Year 2 Reading, 3rd of March, Resource 1. So if you'd like to follow while I'm reading, that's fine. But if you'd just like to listen at this point, that is also fine. So chapter 12, Badger. Mr. Fox and the 3 remaining small foxes dug fast and straight. They were all too excited now to feel tired or hungry. They knew they were going to have a whacking great feast before long, and the fact that it was none other than Boggis's chickens they were going to eat made them churgle with laughter every time they thought of it. It was lovely to realise that while the fat farmer was sitting up there on the hill waiting for them to starve, he was also giving them their dinner without knowing it. Now, on this page, we have the sentence, they knew they were going to have a whacking great feast. Now, what do you think the word whacking means? It's an adjective, okay, because it's describing the feast. Well, we know from the last chapter that Mr. Fox and the small foxes had quite a few hens, didn't they? And then the small fox ran back to Mrs. Fox and they started preparing the feast. So they had a lot of hens. So therefore, do we think whacking is going to mean very small? Oh no, it doesn't. Whacking, as I said, is an adjective. It has 2 syllables, whacking. and it means very large. And in this case, the author is using whacking to describe the feast and to emphasize just how big it is. Now, some synonyms of the word whacking are huge, massive, enormous, gigantic. I'm sure you can think of some other synonyms for this word as well. And then some antonyms, so the opposite of whacking, are tiny, minuscule, minute. And the feast that they were just about to have was definitely not tiny, minuscule, or minute, was it? It was whacking, it was very large. Okay, so that is what whacking means, the adjective whacking. Now let's carry on reading. Keep digging, said Mr. Fox. It's not much further. Okay, we're on to the next page now.